Yeah, so Mike, you were saying Estonia after the World War One. Of course, it became independent in 1918 precisely because of this Brest-Litovsk treaty. How do the Estonians feel about that, and how much do they know about it?
Yeah, Estonia, they got the independence, and we had President Konstantin Päts. First, Päts and Laidoner, they were like pro-Estonian, and they were really caring about their people. But of course, politicians being too much in a long time in power, they started to have corruption. Especially what they did was the royal family from Russia, their gold was washed through the Estonia, and especially Konstantin Päts, our president, was behind it. So he got super rich, people, they just didn't get nothing, but it went worse. So to keep power, he started to eliminate all those other parties who were like pro-independence, anti-corruption. So at the end, in the 1930s, it was basically saying what's happening right now. There is no freedom of speech. There was no one who could say anything against the government. They went to prison. So it's history repeats itself. And I think, and it took so many years, Estonians to lose their independence. And why they lost their independence was because of those corrupt politicians who didn't want to fight against Bolsheviks. So you can see.
Pets, I mean, I think what happens is that these small countries, no one knows anything about them, and it's very easy to create a narrative about them, and no one can speak up against it. So I guess there's a strong anti-Russian lobby, and just because the Russians do bad things or did bad things doesn't mean that the Balts do good things. And pets,
not Russians, not people, but the government.
Yeah.
There is the big difference. Russian people are,
Absolutely.
friendly people.
Absolutely. Well, we've had before, and I'm very pro. I'm very anti. I think we're all extremely anti the predominant London, Washington, Brussels narrative, which has caused a lot of trouble. But Pets was oppressed free speech in the 1930s, and I guess when the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, people assumed that these three Baltic states were kind of paragons of democracy when they were gobbled up, but they were not. But so your main topic, I guess, and that's what we've talked about before, is you provide a necessary and a salutary counter narrative to the sort of lovely, peaceful, wonderful, democratic freedom house #1, angels of geopolitics. Well, we've got a new audience on this show, so you can tell us what you sent me some documentation showing that it's not at all the ideal democracy it's cracked out to be. Now, Kaja Kallas, of course, is the EU's foreign minister, a very attractive, physically attractive woman who's prime minister. And she's always saying, well, I came from Estonia, which has e-democracy, and we're #1 in the Freedom House Europe democracy ranking and freedom ranking. So my authority comes from that. But it's not that story. The real story is something different, isn't it?
It's very different, and same like 1930s. Right now in Estonia, you can't speak up. You can lose your job. You can be excluded as actually from banking. So you can't use bank accounts. So basically you are unemployed. So you have no other choice just to leave the country. And for me, I paid the price because Estonian, how you call it, it's kapo. It's like Secret Service. They notified Polish government not to deal with me, that I'm Russian agent, of course, and when I asked them, show me some proof, they said, oh, we can't relieve our sources. So this is the joke. Everybody who says something against the Estonian government is labeled right now Kremlin asset or agent, or even they said that I'm CIA agent in one point. Just make your mind which one you want me to be. But because I'm also Estonian citizen and US citizen, but US citizenship doesn't work in Estonia for me because I have two passports. So this created a problem that I can't go back to my home country anymore. So, and what happened 2 days ago, one of the leading Estonian investigative journalists, they were Oleg Besedin, he was arrested without any explanation. He always gives like both sides to talk about, what's happening and trying to be like really independent. And his show was watching like millions of people across the world. And he was just arrested 2 days ago, no explanation. He's just disappeared. So you can see what's going on in Estonia, and nobody speaks about it. Why they don't speak about it? It's because, George Soros is ruling actually that country. There is everything points that we gained our independence 1991, but we lost in same year because George Soros was behind it. He was in Estonia already in 1988, and he was meeting all those communist elite people and their families. And of course, they're still in power. In 30 years later, there's still nothing changed. And
Siim Kallas was my first job after leaving journalism school in 1992 was I got a job in a newspaper called the Baltic Independent, which was edited by Edward Lucas and Tarmo Tammärk. Have you heard of Tarmo Tammärk?
No, but Edward Lucas,
man on the Estonian television or something, a kind of ideologue in chief, I guess, to make sure that they're anti-Russian. And they hated the Russians, my secretary said, God, I was on the bus this morning. The Russians really smell, and I was declared persona non grata in the end because I got inside information from their reading of the close Russian-Estonian press, and I told the world because I had strings to the Western media, and I was supposed to be on their side, as it were, like an activist like Edward Lucas was, whereas I was a truth teller. I like the Estonians, but I actually liked the Russians even more. I thought the Russians were like Latin by comparison. The Estonians are they're like Finns, a bit socially retarded, if you like. Disciplined and all that, but like Scandinavians. And there was a big clash there with the Russians. Anyway, but the Soros, I think Soros funded the Baltic Independent.
Yeah,
and
let's start with that Siim Kallas. So this is one of the main important things why everything went wrong in Estonia. So basically, he had problems in university already, but suddenly he became head of Estonian bank. It was Soviet owned, but it was only one bank. And what happened was suddenly disappeared lots of money, like millions of rubles from the accounts. And then they started to look, and he was just keeping people who were actually died on list and took their money to themselves. So any normal person in Soviet Union, for that of crime, you're going to get a life in prison, but not him. Estonian Prime Minister in that time, they basically pardoned. So said that, okay, nothing happened, nothing to look here. But only person actually had that power was, head of KGB. So my sources tell that that's where everything started to go wrong. So that's when he got his hook behind his. And, he was educated already in 1984 how to run capitalist country, capitalist, companies, all that before, glasnost, all that. So that means there was all planned what's going to happen. And, and he was the main guy. And when Estonia got the independence, right away, he got head of Estonian Independent Bank. That means the main Estonian bank. So,
right. Mike, we've got to run through this again.
Yeah.
So Siim Kallas was an Estonian journalist, very communist, very sort of part of the establishment in Estonia during the communist time. He then was it KGB who had their hooks into him because, okay. And then he started to learn how to run a capitalist economy in 1984.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to anticipate you by saying, is that because the Soviets were planning to kind of end communism and then use Estonia as an experiment, a guinea pig, because it was a small and Western-looking country. And then if it worked there, they'd use it for the rest of the Soviet Union.
Of course, I
Wow,
think, you know.
I mean, that's a huge contribution to the historiography of the Cold War.
Yeah.
That's a knockout. I mean, I was just reading what's his name? That guy at the London School of Economics, Zubok. He wrote a big book about the Cold War, end of the Cold War. He doesn't mention that at all. So great stuff, sir. Well, carry on with your story then.
Yeah, that, you know, what are my sources? You know, people are still, you know, who know what happened. They're still online, and they are, you know, sending me letters. You know, that's what happens. That's what I saw in my eyes. You know, I was working with Siim Kallas, or I went to school with Siim Kallas, and that's what I saw. That's what happened. So, you know, you can't see that online or, you know, Wikipedia, because, you know, they don't talk about it. But people who are still alive, there is many of that kind of strange things what happened in Estonia, but what I won't talk right now. But it happened that people who didn't have any job before suddenly became, you know, ambassadors. You know, this is it doesn't happen like this. And they said, and at the end, you see that they were actually editors in, you know, communist newspapers. So, so there is a lots of that kind of stuff. And what happened in Estonia also is when Russian occupation ended, they gave back all the KGB files with the names. They didn't open them ever. So what happens is that the new Estonian Secret Service was made from those KGB people. And this is fact. This is, you know, you can ask around, and this is, you know, they say, oh, they had knowledge.
Right.
But no, the system went on. Nothing changed.
Right. Wow. And I've often thought that this war on Russia, as it were, the political war in collaboration with MI6, is because the Estonians were expert KGB operatives and turning on their old masters, but using those methods and very well trained, you know.
I
I
think
mean,
it's it.
yeah,
What happened is, if you look right now, what's happening in Europe, then you can look back and you can understand that all that Marxism was exported to Western Europe. And if you look what happened in Soviet Union, you know that they were mixing nations. They were bringing Russians and different Ukrainians to Estonia to mix the people, that you won't have that one single nationality in that country. In Europe, it's exactly the same thing. You know,
yeah,
there is nothing new, and where it comes from. And if you look, the Kaja Kallas is in power. You know, his dad was KGB asset. So, you know, if you look like this, then you see it, and then you understand why everything is so wrong in Western Europe.
you know, this is fantastic. I don't often get these revelations because, I mean, I've studied a lot on these subjects, but you've just given me a crucial jigsaw piece. Let me explain. Because there was a guy called Golitsyn in the 1980s, and he said to the Western intelligence agencies, don't trust Gorbachev because they're going to take you over, but under the guise of being nice social democrats. So it's like sheep in wolf's clothing, right? So that's why, for instance, they distrusted Palme in Sweden, and they distrusted Wilson in England, because they said, these guys, they're just going to be friendly with the Soviets, and they don't realize what the Soviets are really planning to do. Okay. Now, I can believe it because Europe has become the Soviet Union, and the new powers in Brussels, they are the East Europeans, these small countries running us, you know, Estonia, Lithuania, these little dwarfs are running our European foreign policy and running us into war with a nuclear power. And so how did this happen? We didn't vote for this. We thought these were the poor East European peasants, and we're just going to give them a chance to get a bit of Western capitalism. And suddenly they've taken over us. So actually, what Golitsyn said came true, except it wasn't Moscow that did this. It was the Moscow satellites that have infiltrated us.
Exactly.
So actually, we can turn the Golitsyn argument, which I think lives on in some elements. Let's say Edward Lucas says, oh, the Russians are kind of infiltrating us, you know, with their little sleeper spies in Washington and so on. And I even before I heard what you just said, I thought, yeah, but I mean, you know, we're warned about the Russian KGB, but what about the Ukrainian KGB? They're already in bed with MI6 and got blackmail and sending girls and boys over to seduce British politicians, and they're the same kind as their Russian counterparts. So while we're warned about Moscow, 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 Kiev has already taken over us, you know, and Estonian intelligence has already taken over us. And so we've become Sovietized, but we've looked at the wrong adversary, Moscow, when it's in fact the Balts and the Ukrainians that have kind of colonized us intellectually. Is that
So,
what you're
like,
saying? Yeah.
yeah, but you know, there is more. Kaja Kallas, you know, she is, you know, fierce fighter against Russia. But like 2 years ago, it came light that her husband, Arvo Hallik, he was having like $1 million business in Russia with Russians and the Russian military. And how? So basically, there was the sanctions, so you couldn't do business with Russia. But the one guy got like a free pass, special license to do anything, any business with Russia. And it was Arvo Hallik. And Kaja Kallas, she invested 390,000 euros there. And, you know, the business went through the roof. And, you know, and then you say, who is asset? And oh, what's going on? There is no way. And she claimed that, oh, she didn't have any idea, you know, of course. But she went to those warehouses, you know, a couple of months before it came out. And she knew exactly what was going on. And that they were providing like special kind of like metals and special kind of like chemical components for Russian military. So something is really wrong here.
So she's still married. I mean, what's your take on this, Martin? Sorry, I mean Martin was working on the Soviet desk of the Washington Times in the 1980s, and he was Reagan's favorite journalist. So I mean, when we're talking about my experience as a young journalist, you were a mature journalist in those days, and you knew all of. I mean, you followed the Estonian independence movement, Martin. What do you say about this? That the Kaja Kallas's husband was selling military equipment to the Russians.
Oh, first of all, of course he was. But this is just general nomenclatura corruption. And you see it with people like Sir William Broder in England, who is now, of course, as we know, one of the darkest Cold Warriors. And I was a good friend to Edward Lucas, as I thought he was to me in the 1980s, because we were both fierce anti-communists together. But I would agree with the assessment of both of you completely, but I would change the label. I would say the European Union has not been taken over by the communists of the Soviet Union. It's been taken over by the National Socialists. Instead, you are absolutely right, Pelle. Eastern Europe is the tail that wags the dog, and I have been writing this in analyses, and I'm not allowed to write it in America. I'm just not. Except now, Realist Review manages to get a few articles out, but you cannot get this out in The Nation. You cannot get this out in National Review. You cannot get this out on the left or the right, and it is this: that we are being brought into thermonuclear confrontation with Russia by racist Russian haters who are, and it is not driven primarily it is not driven at all by the American or the British people, though the British in particular are going along with it like passive sheep, as you and I have discussed before. As passive sheep, they're being led to their own slaughter, right? Who's pulling the strings? Eastern Europe is pulling the strings, exactly as you said, Pelle, on Western Europe and the United States. But who is pulling the strings in Eastern Europe? Kiev is, but Kiev is not the Ukrainian people. Kiev is the CIA-backed Western Ukrainian fascists who carried out some of the most monstrous war crimes and helped operate Auschwitz, no less, Ukrainian guards. Not from the Ukrainian people as a whole. Most of the Ukrainian people fought the Nazis gallantly. But from Western Ukraine, you had, and they had very good reason to hate the Russians like poison after Lenin and Stalin and all their own genocides. And again, all of this goes back to how we started. It starts with the original sin of 1914. And it isn't just, most of my life was convinced that it was more stupidity by the militaries in all these countries that created the great catastrophe of 1914. And Churchill was certainly in the front for all of that. But no, there was definitely more, because you have too many assassinations within 2 or 3 months of each other. The attempt to eliminate Rasputin, which eliminates him from telling the Tsar to prevent war, which he was determined to do in 1914. The murder of Jaurès, the assassination of Jaurès in Paris, which is of enormous importance, which does not exist in Anglo-American historiography. It is a George Orwellian black hole. It has been put in the memory hole. It does not exist. And the only historian to ever mention Jaurès' murder tells it as a sweet, tragic, furry story. The incredibly stupid Barbara Tuchman, who was wrong on everything she ever wrote on anything. But she wrote, as I heard in New York, there's a Yiddish phrase, she tells a good Maisa. She tells a good Yiddish fairy tale. And that's what it is. It's an absurd fairy tale. Any Irish Gaelic Shonachie would do far better, far better. And of course, you have the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which is not just the spark that sets off the war. It is also the elimination of the great figure who opposes war in Austria-Hungary and is greatly respected by the Kaiser in Berlin, and would have told him not to do the war either. And all of a sudden, in a monstrous upheaval, this figure who opposes war is murdered to clear the way for Conrad von Hudson, Bach, I always forget the last name, but Conrad, one of the most stupid and catastrophic generals of all time, a man who lost every battle he ever fought, the Austrian chief of staff. All of this. They're all eliminated at the same time. And in Germany, you have Rosa Luxemburg silenced, eventually murdered. You mentioned before about the fake atrocities in Belgium, which were used to propel Britain into war. These atrocities were exposed by Britain's greatest human rights hero, who had been knighted by King George V. And single-handedly, not single-handedly, but it was the leading figure in ending the genocide of 10 million innocent people in Congo in Africa, Roger Casement. And the British establishment and deep state never forgave Casement for this. They faked his diaries to make him out to be a pedophile. Of course, they were the pedophiles. He didn't even touch a woman in his life. He was a sexual innocent, and an admirable, an admirable man. He should have been a priest. Then at least the church could have protected him. And he actually became a Catholic right before he was hanged for treason, which he did not commit. But he's eliminated in 1916. Bertrand Russell, there's an attempt to eliminate him because he opposes the war so outspokenly and courageously in 1914. And he's thrown into jail and beaten and forced to do hard labor in 1915-16. But he's a tough old bird. He outlasts them all. But all these figures are systematically murdered or jailed and persecuted, and they're all shut down in the darkest days, as Douglas Newton puts it, of summer 1940. And this is coordinated across Europe. It's wicked and it's insane. And Poincaré, as president of France, I think is the dark spider at the center of this evil web.
Okay, so but just I want to go back to what you're saying about. Well, I was saying, well, maybe the Golitsyn's communists took over, and you're saying, well, it's the Nazis, it's the survivors, it's the Bandera,
it's the National Socialists,
the National Socialists, and of course, a lot of our leaders now seem to have Nazi backgrounds. You know, Merz, for instance, his grandfather, Kaja Kallas, his grandfather, Baerbock, and they're women, they're young women, and they don't say these incredible things about how sorry they are that their grandfather died for, and things like that. You think maybe the Russians are right. The Russians are saying there's a Nazi cabal uniting against us. So, well, I want to bring Mike in because, I mean, Martin's saying it's a rightist force that is assembling against the Russians and bringing us to nuclear war. And I was saying, well, it's the descendants of the communist apparatchiks and nomenclatura and spy world. Who's right, or are we both right, or right. Just give us a lead.
It's hard to tell, but I think the banking world, the World Bank, IMF, Economic Forum, they are all behind it. If you look at Estonia, then in Estonian government, there is incredibly stupid people running. This is other countries you go and you see, you know, doctors running the government or at least giving the advice. In Estonia, it's other way around. You know, the stupidest person from the village, he is sent to be like a minister. And of course, their aide will be like a 21-year-old girl, you know, nice-looking girl. What kind of advice can that kind of girl can give? So this is happening like everywhere. And you look and you don't understand, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, we understand that. We know that in Estonia we have internet voting.
Yeah.
So that there is last 20 years we haven't had proper elections.
Yeah.
You know, that's how, you know, internet elections, paper ballots are totally different, the outcome. And if you take basically half of the votes are coming from internet, and you can't verify it, and you have to just believe it, but those are like totally different kind of, you know, results. And of course, Kaja Kallas and the team, they have like many parties in Estonia what is influenced. If you look at Estonian politics, you think that, oh, you have 6-7 different parties. But at the end, 5 of them are connected to Kaja Kallas or their family. So this is common knowledge in Estonia, but other, you know, people, they don't know. They say, no, you have democracy, you have even, you know, conservative parties. No, they're not nothing like we believe to be conservative parties.
And so, of course, well, what you're saying is a revelation, because Estonia is sort of the virgin princess of the world at the moment. And the Edith Cavell of the 21st century, as I was saying in my last, Edith Cavell was this English nurse. She was 55 years old and ugly. And she was a spy, and she was executed by the Germans. And all the propaganda that was sent out to the colonies, to Australia and Canada, she was pictured as a beautiful young girl, totally innocent. And millions of Canadians and Australians signed up to kill the German Hun. So Estonia is like Edith Cavell, the lovely little perfect e-democracy, top in innovation, Skype, Spotify, beautiful little people, physically Nordic, you know, and then the horrible barbarian, beastly, orcish Russians. And the Estonians are the elves and the orcs are the Russians. But it's not true, is what you're saying. So you're like a real whistleblower because you speak Estonian. And so are you saying that they stole the elections, basically, by...
Of course, last 20 years. This is what's happening. So that is you know, we can do sometimes like a separate show about it. But what happened was they were starting to lose the grip. It was 2004. So that's why they brought in from Venezuela, from Hugo Chavez, they brought in that internet elections. And they're using same software, even right now, in Venezuela and in Estonia. And if you remember last year, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, both they said that they don't accept Venezuelan those election results, and especially because of the internet voting. So why Estonia is different? So they should, U.S. government should say same thing. You know, I gave them many documents, and there was like OSCE was checking it and said, you know, this is not working. You know, this is very wrong. And, you know, you can't have elections where people don't understand how the system works, or there is no way to, you know, check it. So this is the big problem.
But I mean, wasn't that some of Dominion or Smartmatic? Wasn't the Venezuelan angle? I remember during the election fraud discussions in 2020, the Trump side was talking a lot about Venezuela being the pipeline for the election fraud.
Yeah, so, but who owns Dominion and Smartmatic? It's the same person, George Soros. So there is nothing new here.
Wow.
So, and of course, if you tell something against those elections, especially in Estonia, you know, bad things will happen to you. So.
And Alex Soros, the son of George Soros, was in Romania, and Romania's election was stolen, you know.
Of course.
German elections were stolen. The Wagenknecht party was 2.00% short of getting a representation in parliament. I wouldn't be surprised if the Swedish elections are stolen next year, you know. So, I mean, we're approaching this kind of dictatorship in Europe where the populists, so-called, because they're Democrat, they follow the democratic will, so they're called far right, you know. They are being excluded, and we've got a political elite that is inexperienced morons are driving us into war And they, in fact,
Yes.
they've stolen all the elections so they can do this. They can sit in power. Incredible.
So I can tell you, I was this year in June, I was in Poland. I was invited to observe those presidential elections there. And of course, we made a report and we gave Donald Trump later that report also, and the Heritage Foundation and other think tanks and governments, also to Viktor Orban. And what we found out was they tried to steal it again, because before, when it was parliament elections in Poland, they stole it. It was a little bit different. They made special kind of app. Of course, they didn't make, but Germany made it. And this time, what I noticed was those German-owned TV stations, they only talked about, liberal candidate, and telling how bad is, the Navrosky. If it's in US, we call him Navroki. So I don't know which way is right to say, but here everybody loves Navroki. But the thing was, everywhere, every polling station, there was conservative representatives. They were watching, they were making pictures, making sure that, those elections won't be stolen. And we were lucky, our candidate won. But if you look why they won, was the one thing, young generation. Young generation votes, but that nobody didn't think about it before. They thought that young people, they watch TikTok, Facebook, and, they are liberals. But no, actually, the young people's votes, they made it happen that the conservative president won. So, and the other thing is, if you look at Dansk or western side of Poland, there is lots of people watching, the German TV. They voted for a liberal. So this is interference. This is clear interference for elections. But, it's happening everywhere. And, like in Romania, that was very nasty. So what they wanted to, liberals wanted to keep Romania in their own control, because there is the biggest military base, not on military base in Europe. And it's basically, it's coordinating all the military actions in Ukraine. So they couldn't lose it. So that's why they did everything possible to, rig those elections. Because if you talk anyone from Romania, nobody believes that those were fair elections. The same actually in Estonia. If you ask anybody from street, ask, do we have proper elections? Do you believe that, this is a right thing? Nobody believes. Everybody will say that, this is BS. Only 29% people are believing that Estonia has a fair elections. So basically, this is bankrupt.
Wow.
So basically, there is no elections anymore.
I mean, your story is just so important for us to understand the Ukraine conflict. And I know you're a conservative. You've been to CPAC. Do you think that I hope you're telling these things to American conservatives that you know, and well, I know that you've got links with Jack Posobiec, for instance.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's a very, very successful influencer, and I'm sure you're telling these things. But we have you on again soon, I think, to talk about this in detail. But I wanted to just say one thing, because I was reading a history book about Lithuania. I'm also always very interested in the Baltics, because I said I worked there as my first job, and they said that the there's a female Lithuanian journalist who says that it's a myth that the attack on the TV tower in Lithuania was officially it was the Russians firing at the Lithuanian protesters, but she says it was the Lithuanian Sąjūdis that was firing at their own people from behind, just like happened in Maidan.
Exactly, there is nothing new.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you can't believe what TV is telling you, because it's all propaganda. It's one or other way, and there is many people who are coming up and telling what's actually happened, and how dangerous actually that was, or mostly it's like political theater, for people.
But I mean, just to go back, that this journalist, female journalist, she interviewed a lot of people in the Lithuanian KGB who were saying, well, I mean, these Sajudis were firing at their own people, but they said that Gorbachev didn't do anything. And they were saying that Gorbachev was working with Sajudis. They don't care if he was losing Lithuania. And that links back to what you were saying earlier, which was that did Moscow working behind the scenes to make the Soviet Union capitalist, using the Baltic states to break up the Soviet Union, or at least make it capitalist? And were they coordinating with the West here?
I believe so.
Yeah,
because
wow.
the main thing is why 1988, nobody couldn't come to Estonia without, proper paperwork or, clearances, security clearances. Even, you normally, if you travel somewhere, you have to have some KGB agent with you, checking that, you're not going to talk to wrong people. And then billionaire comes from America, and he can go wherever he wants, makes all those appointments and meetings with all those top level communists. So that's that's clear sign that
gentlemen, I'm afraid we've got to wind up there because our time's up for the show. But I mean, any concluding remarks you want to make, Martin? I think we've got 30 seconds.
Yes. I mean, I was in Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia in 1989. I got my first Pulitzer nomination for recording the disintegration of the Soviet Empire. You've got, on this point, I do disagree. This was not coolly coordinated by Gorbachev and the communists in Moscow. Gorbachev was a bungling asshole. And even Yeltsin was able to outplay him, and Putin always despised him. He was the Jimmy Carter of Russia, of the Soviet Union. He did not want to disintegrate the Soviet Union, but he did not have a clue. He thought he could liberalize, and instead he lost control of the process.
Okay, gentlemen,
that was the real story.
The real story is that
was the real. This was not coordinated, brilliant communist planning by Gorbachev. You got it. If you knew Gorbachev, you knew Gorbachev was a fool. Simple.